When Saul was anointed king over Israel, God gave him the specific task of delivering Israel from the Philistines. However, after he was publicly declared king over Israel in Mizpah, he returned to his father's house in Gibeah and resumed his usual activities. The office of king was new in the previously more republican nation where decisions were made by the consent of the tribes. However, this state of affairs would not last long. The Ammonites had been gathering their army to attack Jabesh Gibeah on the east side of the Jordan. In fact, this looming battle may have been part of the reason that the children of Israel asked for a king in the first place. Samuel referred to this situation in his later discourse with the elders of Israel. 1 Samuel 12, verse 12. And when you saw that Nahash, king of the Ammonites, came against you, you said to me, No, but a king shall reign over us, when the Lord your God was your king. Although God gave Saul the task of delivering Israel from the internal threat posed by the Philistines, Saul's first task was to deliver Israel from the external threat posed by the Ammonites. When we dig deeper into this situation, we see the connection to earlier events recorded in the book of Judges, as well as parallels with Adam. I'm Dan Cathcart, and this is the Promise of Rest. The Septuagint, the Vulgate, and Josephus all agree that the Philistines began their attack against Jabesh Gilead about 1 month after Saul was made king. The Masoretic text merely states that this occurred after Saul was made king in Mizpah. 1 Samuel 11, verse 1. Then Nahash the Ammonite came up and encamped against Jabesh Gilead, and all the men of Jabesh said to Nahash, Make a covenant with us, and we will serve you. The name Nahash is number 5176 in the Strong's Concordance, and it's from Nakash, number 5175, which means serpent. This is the same word used for the serpent who tempts Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. Adam, as God's designated ruler of the earth, faced the serpent and failed the test. As a result of Adam's failure, the serpent took over dominion of the earth. Israel, under their brand new king, now faced an attack by the serpent. Now, would Israel retain dominion over their land? The city that Nahash chose to attack was Jabesh Gilead in the tribal lands of Manasseh. Early in the period of the Judges, the men of Jabesh Gilead had failed to assemble before the Lord at Mizpah and to send troops to support the punishment of the tribe of Benjamin when the men of Gibeah abused and killed the concubine of a Levite on his way home. Now, because of the failure of Jabesh Gilead to join in the rest of Israel, the city was destroyed, and 400 women of Jabesh Gilead were given to the few men of Benjamin who survived after the war with the rest of Israel. Now, Saul was a Benjamite from the city of Gibeah. The previous inhabitants of the city were the ones who killed the Levite concubine. So Saul could very well have been a descendant of the women of Jabesh Gilead, who had been given as wives to the men of Benjamin. The city of Jabesh Gilead was apparently rebuilt and re-inhabited by the tribes of Manasseh. The inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead may have questioned whether the rest of Israel would come to their aid because they had not joined with the other tribes and cities at Mizpah. However, coming to the aid of the people east of the Jordan River was a covenant obligation set down by God in the time of Joshua. Joshua 22:28 tells us that the tribes east of the Jordan River built a replica altar to the Lord to remind the tribes on the west side of the river that they also were part of Israel. Would Israel, led by a Benjamite from the city of Gibeah, remember and honor the covenant with the tribes on the east side of the river, particularly the city of Jabesh Gilead? Now, because the residents of Jabesh-Gilead were not sure whether the rest of Israel would come to their aid, they offered to make a covenant with Nahash. But Nahash was intent on humiliating Israel, perhaps in retribution for the defeat that Japheth had inflicted on them years earlier. Nahash offered terms that would cripple the men of Jabesh-Gilead and shame Israel for not coming to the defense of one of their own cities. 1 Samuel 11, verse 2. And Nahash the Ammonite answered them, "On this occasion I will make a covenant with you, that I may put out all your right eyes and bring reproach on all Israel." The elders of Jabesh-Gilead bargained for time. They asked for and received 7 days to send for aid to ponder their decision. Giving them 7 days would certainly be easier for the Ammonites than depending on a siege and fighting against the city. Again, this connects us back to Adam turning over dominion of this world to the serpent. Yeshua defeated the serpent and reclaimed possession of the world at his death and resurrection. When he returns in the 7th millennium, symbolically on the 7th day, he will take possession of this world. In the meantime, the serpent wants us to surrender to him. When the message asking for help arrived at Gibeah, Saul was out in the field plowing. God likes to call people who are busy about their tasks. When God called Gideon, Gideon was threshing wheat. God called Elisha. Elisha was plowing his field. Saul heard the news about the siege of Jabesh-Gilead, and when he returned from the field. 1 Samuel 11, 5 and 6. Now there was Saul coming behind the herd from the field, and Saul said, "What troubles the people, that they weep?" And they told him the words of the men of Jabesh. Then the Spirit of God came upon Saul when he heard this news, and his anger was greatly aroused. The anger that Saul expressed was a righteous anger, directed by the Spirit of God. Saul immediately acted by reminding all of Israel about their covenant obligation to their brothers on the east side of the Jordan. 1 Samuel 11, verse 7. And he took a yoke of oxen and cut them in pieces and sent throughout all the territory of Israel by the hands of messengers, saying, "Whoever does not come out after Saul and after Samuel, so shall it be done to his oxen." And the fear of the Lord fell on the people, and they came out as one man. Now, cutting the oxen in pieces and sending the parts throughout Israel is a reminder of the covenant. In a covenant ceremony, the covenant sacrifice is cut into 2 pieces, and the parties of the covenant walk between the parts of the sacrifice, agreeing that if they break the covenant, it may be done to them as it was done with the covenant sacrifice. Now Saul declared that if anyone in Israel failed to join him in battle against the Ammonites, he would bring covenant judgment against the tribe or city who failed to come out to battle. Now there's an irony in this situation. The last time that a covenant judgment was invoked was when the Levite cut up the body of his murdered concubine and sent the pieces throughout Israel to gather them together in judgment against Gibeah and the tribe of Benjamin. In that situation, Jabesh-Gilead failed to appear and was subsequently destroyed. Now, this same covenant enforcement is being invoked on behalf of Jabesh-Gilead. Now the fear of the Lord fell on the entire land of Israel, and all the cities of Israel responded to Saul's call to go out in battle with both him and Samuel. Now notice that Saul acknowledges Samuel's continuing role and authority as prophet in Israel. The armies of Israel went out together in unity of purpose and spirit. The NKJV Study Bible comments on the influence the fear of the Lord had on the people. The fear of the Lord begins with an awesome awareness of who God is, Proverbs 2:5, and ends with a proper response to good and evil, Proverbs 16, verse 6. Israel went out as one man against Nahash, the serpent. 300,000 came from Israel and 30,000 more from just the tribe of Judah. 1 Samuel 11, verse 8. When he numbered them in Bezek, the children of Israel were 300,000, and the men of Judah 30,000. Now it's interesting that the forces of Judah were numbered separately from the rest of Israel. Later in 1 Samuel 15:4, Judah will also be numbered separately when Israel goes to battle against Amalek. The ArtScroll commentary on 1 Samuel comments on the reason for the separate numbering. Presumably, this was because Judah had always enjoyed preeminent status as the leader of the tribes, as exemplified in the blessings of Jacob, Genesis 49, 8 through 10, and the divine command that Judah be the first to do battle with the Canaanites, Judges 1:1. Now Saul sent a message to Jabesh-Gilead that help was on the way. Help would arrive by the time the sun was hot. The elders of Jabesh-Gilead in turn sent a message to Nahash to misdirect him about their intentions. 1 Samuel 11, 9 through 11. And they said to the messengers who came, "Thus you shall say to the men of Jabesh-Gilead, tomorrow, by the time the sun is hot, you shall have help." Then the messengers came and reported it to the men of Jabesh, and they were glad. Therefore the men of Jabesh said, "Tomorrow we will come out to you, and you may do with us whatever seems good to you." So it was on the next day that Saul put the people in 3 companies, and they came into the midst of the camp in the morning watch, and killed Ammonites until the heat of the day. And it happened that those who survived were scattered, so that no 2 of them were left together. Saul's promise was fulfilled literally. Saul's forces attacked in the morning watch, which was shortly after dawn. The Ammonites, who were expecting the surrender of the city, were caught by surprise. By the time the sun was hot, in verse 9, in the heat of the day, verse 11, the Ammonites had been defeated. Help had not only arrived, but that help had already delivered the city from the Ammonites. Israel came out as one man. The Ammonites were scattered with no 2 men together, indicating the complete division among the Ammonite forces. The sons of Belial, who in 1 Samuel 10:27 had despised Saul and questioned his ability to save Israel, were silenced. Saul's supporters wanted those mockers to be brought out and put to death. 1 Samuel 11, 12 through 13. Then the people said to Samuel, "Who is he who said, 'Shall Saul reign over us?' Bring the men, that we may put them to death." But Saul said, "Not a man shall be put to death this day, for today the Lord has accomplished salvation in Israel." God had used Saul to deliver Israel from the Ammonites, and Saul was not in a mood to have anyone executed. He let his actions speak for him to silence his detractors. Samuel then instructed all the people to gather to Gilgal on the western shore of the Jordan River, where Israel had first crossed over into the land. 1 Samuel 11, 14 through 15. Then Samuel said to the people, "Come, let us go to Gilgal and renew the kingdom there." So all the people went to Gilgal, and there they made Saul king before the Lord in Gilgal. There they made sacrifices of peace offerings before the Lord, and there Saul and all the men of Israel rejoiced greatly. When Israel gathered at Gilgal, when they first entered the Promised Land, they set up stones in memory of their crossing the Jordan on dry land, and so that they would know and fear the Lord. Joshua 4, 21 and 22. Then he spoke to the children of Israel, saying, "When your children ask their fathers in times to come, saying, 'What are these stones?' then you shall let your children know, saying, 'Israel crossed over this Jordan on dry land.' that all the people of the earth may know the hand of the Lord, that it is mighty, that you may fear the Lord your God forever." With the resounding defeat of the Ammonites, Israel once again experienced the mighty hand of the Lord. Gilgal was also where God declared that he had rolled away the reproach of Egypt from them. The Ammonites had wanted to bring reproach on all Israel, so it was appropriate that Israel gather at Gilgal after avoiding the reproach that Nahash wanted to bring on them. So there in Gilgal, in the presence of the memorial stones, Samuel renewed the kingdom with Saul as king before the Lord. The phrase "before the Lord" is used twice in verse 15 to emphasize that Saul's kingship was in submission to the Lord. This theme will be picked up in Samuel's discourse in chapter 12. The coronation ceremony at Gilgal, confirming Saul as king, was actually the third anointing or proclamation of Saul as king. The first anointing was in private between Samuel and Saul in the presence of God. The second was in front of all the people at Mizpah through the direction of the Lord. Now this third anointing at Gilgal recognized Saul's first victory as king through the power of God. As Israel rejoiced greatly in their new king, Samuel gathered the people and reminded them of his earlier reluctance to give them a king. 1 Samuel 12, 1 and 2. Now Samuel said to all Israel, "Indeed, I have heeded your voice in all that you said to me, and have made a king over you. And now here is the king, walking before you, and I am old and gray-headed. And look, my sons are with you. I have walked before you from my childhood to this day." Samuel goes on to declare that he was faithful in carrying out the duties and responsibilities of the office of judge. The people willingly testified that Samuel had not failed in his duties nor abused his office in any way. This establishes Samuel as a faithful and true witness, setting up his next words as he testifies about the righteous acts of the Lord on their behalf. 1 Samuel 12, 7 and 8. "Now therefore stand still, that I may reason with you before the Lord concerning all the righteous acts of the Lord, which he did to you and your fathers, when Jacob had gone into Egypt, and your fathers cried out to the Lord. Then the Lord sent Moses and Aaron, who brought your fathers out of Egypt and made them dwell in this place." Samuel goes on to remind Israel that they forgot the Lord over and over, but when they cried out to him, God heard them and sent deliverers to them. 1 Samuel 12, verse 11. "And the Lord sent Jerubbaal, Bedan, Jephthah, and Samuel, and delivered you out of the hand of your enemies on every side, and you dwelt in safety." Now, every time that Israel sinned, God allowed them to be defeated or oppressed by their enemies. But when they repented and called out to God, he sent them a deliverer, after which they dwelt in safety. Now, the same thing would have happened in this case if they had just repented and cried out to God. However, the children of Israel instead chose to cry out for a king. 1 Samuel 12, 12 through 13. "When you saw that Nahash, the king of the sons of Ammon, came against you, you said to me, 'No, but a king shall reign over us,' although the Lord your God was your king. Now therefore, here is the king whom you have chosen, whom you have asked for, and behold, the Lord has sent a king over you." The Hebrew reminds us of the deliberate choice that God made when he selected Saul to be king. The word chosen is the Hebrew word bakar, number 977, meaning to try, choose, or appoint. This is the root word of the Hebrew word bakur, number 970, which is used in 1 Samuel 9:2 to describe Saul as choice or handsome. Also, the Hebrew word translated as asked for is the Hebrew word sha'al, number 7592, which is the word from which Saul gets his name. The children of Israel asked for a king and chose to accept the king God selected. After Samuel established his credentials as a witness and attested to God's righteous acts toward them in spite of their turning away, Samuel gets to the essential part of his discourse. Even though God gave them a king, they and their king are still under God's sovereignty. 1 Samuel 12:14 and 15. If you fear the Lord, and serve him, and obey his voice, and do not rebel against the commandments of the Lord, then both you and the king who reigns over you will continue following the Lord your God. However, if you do not obey the voice of the Lord, but rebel against the commandments of the Lord, then the hand of the Lord will be against you as it was against your fathers. As a sign of the truth and importance of Samuel's words, and as a consequence that Israel had done wickedly in asking for a king, Samuel asked God to bring thunder and rain. 1 Samuel 12:16 through 18. Now therefore stand and see this great thing which the Lord will do before your eyes. Is today not the wheat harvest? I will call to the Lord, and he will send thunder and rain, that you may perceive and see that your wickedness is great, which you have done in the sight of the Lord, in asking for a king for yourselves. So Samuel called to the Lord, and the Lord sent thunder and rain that day, and all the people greatly feared the Lord and Samuel. The significance of this event at the time of the wheat harvest is twofold. The first and most obvious significance is that the rain would damage, if not outright ruin, the wheat harvest. The second is that God spoke to them from Mount Sinai with thunderings and lightnings in the 3rd month of the year, which was when the wheat harvest began. The thunder would have reminded them of God's voice as he spoke to their fathers at Mount Sinai. The rain that damaged their crops would remind them of the punishment for turning away from the Lord and not listening to his voice. The people repented and acknowledged their sin in asking for a king other than God. Samuel encouraged them that although they sinned, if they would continue to follow the Lord would not forsake them. 1 Samuel 12:20-23. Then Samuel said to the people, "Do not fear. You have done all this wickedness, yet do not turn aside from following the Lord, but serve the Lord with all your heart, and do not turn aside, for then you would go after empty things which cannot profit or deliver, for they are nothing. For the Lord will not forsake his people for his great name's sake, because it has pleased the Lord to make you his people. Moreover, as for me, far be it from me that I should sin against the Lord in ceasing to pray for you, but I will teach you the good and the right way." Samuel promised to continue to pray for them and to teach them the good and right way. He admonished them to continue to serve the Lord and remember the great things he had done for them. He continued with one final warning. 1 Samuel 12:25. "But if you still do wickedly, you shall be swept away, both you and your king." Now, in other words, the fact that they now had a king did not change their responsibility to God. They are still bound to the covenant they made with the Lord at Mount Sinai, except now they are also subject to the authority of a human king. I'm Dan Cathcart for Moed Ministries International. Shalom, and be blessed.